I'm really confused about the situation in relation to aviation. We knew that the quarantine arrangements were in place, that if you went abroad and came back, or anyone coming into this country would have to fill out a form and be quarantined for 14 days. We've heard that there was some date that air bridges were open up in the EU, and we hear different things in different parts of the States and down under. And we're wondering, what is the situation after the 1st of July, when Ryanair want us all to fly again? So different rules by airlines and so on. Well, to give us an overview of what is the situation and what's likely to emerge for people who want to travel abroad, it's a pleasure to welcome back to the programme the editor of Air and Travel magazine, Eoghan Corry. Maybe you just give us a pen picture of the regulations here and how they compare with the EU, both now and going forward.
Good afternoon, Ivan. I'm not sure I can bring much clarity to it, but I will try. June the 15th, last Monday, was the date when the European borders opened. A lot of European countries are already open. The rest of them have dates more or less bundling into place between now and July the 1st. July the 1st is the date that you alluded to. Ryanair, they've put seat sales out there, amazing prices, €60 one way to Lanzarote, €34 one way to Barcelona. They want us back in the sky. But as you alluded to, the Irish government are not tremendously happy with that. There are two ways. They can't actually stop people jumping on those Ryanair flights on July the 1st, but two ways they can make life a little bit difficult. One of them is, as you alluded to, the quarantine. You fill out a file locator form on your return to Ireland, and you're supposed to self-quarantine for 14 days, having given your contact details on that form. The problem with that and the issue with that is that while not filling out the locator form is illegal, there's no legal enforcement of the quarantine. It's not illegal it's illegal not to fill out the locator form. It's not illegal to break the quarantine. The second thing that the government can do is the Department of Foreign Affairs advisory against all but essential travel. That applies to every country in the world at the moment. And that means that if you travel, your travel insurance is void. They're enough of a deterrent for people to think twice before jumping on those amazing value Ryanair flights. And there are lots of other airlines are coming in, some on the back of Ryanair, but the eastbound ones have already jumped into action. Etihad were supposed to start July the 1st. They started last week. Emirates started flying yesterday. Qatar, who have been flying all the way through, are increasing their service from 2 to 7 flights a week. Turkish Airlines are coming in next week. The airlines are jumping, but the government doesn't want that to happen. They want to calm everybody down a bit. And Leo Varadkar was very clear on Friday. It's not the time to get back into leisure travel. And he said it will be a fortnight away from last Friday. But there was a leaked memo overnight suggesting that the health people want to push that back to July the 9th. The rest of Europe is moving. We're stalling.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. What is the rest of Europe doing?
The rest of Europe, in generality, followed last Monday. There was a couple of spats along the way. The Spanish decided to open the border with Portugal, for instance, without telling the Portuguese. So a little bit of a crisis there, a little bit. But what we see in countries like Spain, which is huge for the Irish market, let's face it, the Irish holiday market is dominated by Spain. 2 million visits a year off our population. They are opening regions, so they'll have about 4 of the regions open by July the 1st. Most significant for Ireland is Lanzarote, the Canary Islands, very big favourites of ours. Next is the Malaga region and the Costa Dorada down Barcelona to Tarragona. They're all going to be open. The Balearics a little bit slower, but the idea is Spain is going by region, and Portugal is treating the whole country as one region, and they're up and running.
And beyond Europe?
Beyond Europe is more complicated. Most of the countries that we fly to long haul are not open. Even Emirates have started that service. Dubai itself is not open. The eastbound airlines, they depend very heavily on for yield, if not for numbers, on the traffic to Australia. Australia came out this morning saying we're pretty much closed until 2021. The long haul situation is going to be slower to return, but one of the reasons the eastbound airlines have jumped early, Ivan, is that cargo is a very important part of what they do. So moving from 2 to 7 flights a week, they're very low load factors. And the early flights for a lot of these destinations are going to be still repatriating people. There's still people trying to get back to where they were supposed to be in March. Westbound, we still have 3 flights daily, Chicago, Boston, New York. Incredible that that's happening because Irish people cannot get into the United States at the moment and Americans aren't allowed in to here. But again, cargo is a very important part of that equation. What is interesting to watch is the American Airlines and United Airlines have both announced start-up dates in the first week in July. Air Canada have announced a start-up for July the 2nd, Toronto. We're waiting on Delta, but again, the services are coming back, but the regulations are not encouraging leisure travel. And some of the airlines have got a little bit of cold feet. We saw Finnair, they put in an opening date in the middle of July and they pushed it back yesterday to August. Mixed messages for the airlines as well as for the consumer. Nobody's really clear what the thinking in Ireland is because the rest of Europe clearly does not want us to have a quarantine. But luckily, most of the ire of the rest of Europe is being focused on our neighbours because they have a very highly publicised quarantine that came into effect Monday of last week. What is interesting to watch, Ivan, is reciprocity. The French saying...
That's what I wanted to ask you about reciprocity insofar as there was a lot of talk about bilateral air bridges. Have any of them worked?
They haven't. They aren't up and running, Ivan. The air bridge was an interesting... it came out of the travel bubble. The travel bubble was floated between New Zealand and Australia about a month ago. Then the Baltic states moved quickly to create one. The European Commission said they want all the borders to come open more or less together. When we looked at the neighbouring island and another couple of countries looked at their neighbours, they said the travel bubble won't work geographically. But in the modern age, with so many air routes, you could actually set up partnerships with countries that have low contagion rates or low caseloads. And it's been mentioned politically here, but we haven't seen a single proposal about it. And one of the outbound ones that was heavily discussed without it being given any sort of reinforcement legally is Ireland with the Canary Islands. And one of the inbound ones which has been discussed is Germany, which is pretty much the best in class in terms of managing coronavirus as an inbound destination into Ireland. Obviously, the Irish inbound industry is struggling to pick up the pieces of what should have been the tourist season and saving what's left of summer.
You know the adage that was kind of core to the whole thing, we're all in this together. Are we all in this together? The
last pro-European approach tweet I saw from Simon Harris was, I think, March the 12th. It's quite clear we had a coherent approach early in this to try and, take it on as Europe. And once the outbreak in Italy, northern Italy, fell apart, everybody did their own thing. Something that I didn't think I'd see in my lifetime, the drawbridges all being pulled up, the French-German border being closed, Luxembourg closing off to its neighbours. I mean, everybody knows that the workforce in Luxembourg all lives across the border somewhere. Getting it back, getting the drawbridge put back down again is much more difficult than pulling it up because the politicians can quickly find themselves caught up in a Twitter storm saying don't let other people in because they're going to bring back the disease. But what is interesting, Ivan, is the playgrounds for Europe. The Canary Islands has the lowest caseload in Spain. The parts of northern Italy, like along the around Lake Garda and Lake Como, had the lowest rates in the very heavily infected region of Lombardy. The Greek islands were not affected. So travel hasn't been what brought coronavirus. The big clusters are in the big cities. The real problem is it'll take a brave politician to say we're throwing open our borders again, because the perception hasn't changed much from the 14th century when the plague arrives. Blame the foreigners.
All right, my thanks. A very succinct overview of what's happening both at home and abroad. It seems to me that our tourism industry will not be able to get going for the foreseeable in terms of external tourists into the country. My thanks to Eoghan Corry.
Always a pleasure, Ivan.
Travel Magazine. Now, we've got a huge